get up. And on the way up, we're going to bite a kneecap off, all right? And we're going to stand up, and then it's going to take 2 more shots to knock us down, all right? And on the way up, we're going to take your other kneecap, and we're going to get up, and then it's going to take 3 shots to get us down.
Hey, Kneecaps Nation. We are back again for another exciting edition of Kneecaps for Breakfast. Vince Progar, that's me. Happy to be joined, as always, by the ever hard-working man, Phil Byrne. And Phil, I got some good news for you.
Okay.
That we're not stuck in some time-space continuum where we dialed the calendar back 3 days to where it's Monday morning again. It is indeed Thursday morning when you're getting this podcast dropped to your inbox. You're not stuck in Monday morning Groundhog Day style, so that is the good news.
Groundhog Day. Well, let's go back to like 2010, 2011, because I've been working on a project. I wouldn't say last minute or anything like that, but into the wee hours of the night, and I'm on not so much a radio show, but talking to you about sports over some sort of recorded medium.
Yeah.
So it's like, going back to college with all of this.
It's like you're smack dab in the middle of the state of Michigan all over again, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
What's funny about that, Phil, is usually it's me, the one that is saying, hey, Phil, can we bump this back a day or whatever the case? I got something going on, or I got this happening or that happening. And it was you that said, hey, can we push her back and then push her back, So I'm totally fine not being the, being the bad guy in this one. So by all means, but
yeah.
That's a further reminder that Phil and I are indeed real people with real lives of our own, and sometimes things get in the way. Sometimes it's personal stuff, sometimes it's stuff with work, and in this case for Phil, it was the latter. And I think you were coming home from a weekend up north, if my memory serves me right. So that's why Sunday didn't work.
Yeah.
So it's like before you know it, we're halfway through a whole nother week, and we got to figure out, hey, how are we gonna get this last episode taken care of?
Well, and that's the thing of it. Obviously, the thing that I'm working on at work, I could have done it over the weekend, but my parents just moved into a new house up north. They're kind of getting in there, so was able to go help out, get a little bit of time on the lake, get some time up in Traverse City.
That's awesome.
With some friends and some loved ones. So or some loved ones there. So it was a good time, and
you sure picked a good weekend to do this because it was like 80,000 degrees this past weekend. So having some lake time when it's blistering hot outside couldn't have timed that any better. Well, what also helps, Phil, is all this extra stuff that's going on isn't impeding upon any pressing goings-on with the Lions or with the NFL, because as we've talked about, we're definitely in that dead period as we're in late June at this point, just about July. We'll be in July this time next week. So there's really not a whole lot that we're missing out on or anything like that. So that's the good news. So we can afford to take a few extra days to screw around or tend to personal matters or tend to professional issues or whatnot. So that's the good news. There is some stuff that's worth discussing. And Phil, you and I will get into that tonight. You and I on our last episode got into discussing the assistant coaches on the Lions coaching staff in a little bit greater detail. There was quite a bit of turnover, as you probably know, from last season, so it was a nice refresher to go in depth on the offensive and defensive coaching staffs and whatnot. And what we didn't really get too heavily in was Dan Campbell, because this is already his 4th season on the job, and we already kind of know a good amount of stuff there is to know about the guy. So it's not like you and I have to dedicate a whole lot of time to it. But what's timely about this conversation is the fact that PFF, Pro Football Focus, if that's your thing, came out with their head coach rankings going into the 2025 coaching season. Do you have any idea where Mr. Campbell wound up on this list, Phil?
So they go metrics with this, right? So there's going to be a whole bunch of different things that they're probably putting together. I would say Dan Campbell is not number 1. I wouldn't think. I would assume
you are correct, sir.
some combination of like Andy Reid or why is his name escaping me at the moment? This is totally an off-season moment. The Eagles coach Nick
Sirianni.
Sirianni, yeah, something like that. Probably, I would say maybe like 5. I think he's going to be up there, but I don't think he's at the very tippy top.
So we'll kind of swoop around, kind of like a vulture
Okay.
up in the sky, kind of circling around. So we're just going to kind of circle this whole situation, Phil, before we dive down and
Sure.
attack. So, okay, so you're thinking right around 5. So
Yeah,
let's
I think
branch
so.
out a little bit. Again, swooping around the vulture, looking down below, and then we'll attack. What do you think would constitute as a level of disrespect? If you are Lion fan and you were to read the coach rankings, where would Dan Campbell have to be? At what point and below would Dan Campbell have to be to constitute a level of disrespect?
I would say probably at 10 or lower. I think you'd be hard pressed to find 10 coaches in the NFL that were better than Dan Campbell. Um, I would say that would probably be the cutoff. Then I would think, especially if like you've got 2 of them, in division.
So Campbell, spoiler alert, wound up at number 9. So he's just kind
Okay.
of on that precipice of what you would perceive as slight or disrespect. He's on the right
Yeah.
side of it, though. However, if you look at some local articles in response to that, one headline says Dan Campbell disrespected in PFF returning coaches ranking. Another one, Lions disrespect at an all-time high with latest head coach ranking. So
Ooh.
what I'm questioning is how far up their ass do these writers have? Like, I guess my thing is, what would put Campbell as a let's call it top 5? I'm not going to sit here and say, oh yeah, he should be number 1 every day and twice on Sunday. Like, what do you think Campbell has done to be a top 5 coach in comparison to his contemporaries? What am I missing here, Phil?
Um. Yeah, because I mean, I think he's changed the culture. I think he's built some amazing coaching staffs. I think he's got the culture bought in. But it's 2 back-to-back years in very different scenarios. The way that we exited the playoffs do not sit well. One you can kind of build off of because you got to the NFC Championship game, but you should have been playing in the Super Bowl with the way that you played in the first half.
You let a 17-point second half
Yep.
lead get away from you. That doesn't ever happen.
And then conversely, you completely fell asleep at the wheel against the Washington Commanders and either did not prepare enough for them or you let them kind of come in and you were too high on your horse and get stomped at home. So um those are the 2 big errors in his way. I'm not saying that we needed a win in San Francisco on the road in the NFC Championship game. I still felt like we were ahead of schedule going into that game, but maybe we would be looking at a top 5 ranking for Dan Campbell if we did beat the Commanders at home. And, that would have been at least a win in the postseason this past year.
So here's what the PFF article had to say, and I'll just kind of quickly read through. It says, when Campbell was first hired in 2021, he emphatically announced that he would change the Detroit Lions culture. I think that's mission accomplished, and then some. After starting 4-19-1 over his first year and a half as a coach, Campbell found a way to flip the switch, and the Lions have now won 35 out of their past 44 regular season games. Now, I think that is remarkable, to say the least, especially when you take into account where this franchise was at the time Campbell took over as head coach. I think that is very, very important to his credit. Continues on where it says across that stretch, which started week 9 of 2022, the Lions ranked second in PFF in offensive grade as they resurrected Jared Goff's career. I think that has a lot to do with Ben Johnson, more so than just Dan Campbell, but they're giving him credit for that. The Lions have had an elite offensive line for multiple years and have a deep stable of weapons. You could probably, again, credit Campbell, but also Brad Holmes for stocking the cupboard as far as that goes. Campbell's biggest challenge this season will be coping with the losses of Ben Johnson and Aaron Glenn, but he has proven that he can lead the Lions out of any abyss. So, what is missing from that explanation? Well, we'll figure that out together once we unveil the whole list right here. So, here are the people who are ranked ahead of Campbell.
Little drum roll.
Number 8 is Nick Sirianni, Philadelphia Eagles.
Okay.
Number 7, Kyle Shanahan, San Francisco 49ers. Number 6, Jim Harbaugh, Los Angeles Chargers. Number 5, Mike Tomlin, Pittsburgh Steelers. Number 4, John Harbaugh, Baltimore Ravens. Number 3, Sean McVay, LA Rams. Number 2, Sean Payton, Denver Broncos. And probably the surprise of the rankings there. And number 1, not a great big surprise on this one, Andy Reid from Kansas City. So taking all 8 of those names that are ranked ahead of Campbell on this PFF list, what do you think the common denominator is amongst all 8 of those guys?
I think it's legacy. I think basically they found guys. This list has a lot of guys that have been traditional winners. But I don't know if Jim Harbaugh, 1 year with the LA Chargers, or Sean Payton, 2 years with the Denver Broncos, has done enough to warrant those position rankings. Like, I don't think. Are they fantastic coaches? Absolutely. I don't know if it's just simply a track record thing and they're just expecting that both of them are going to flip on it there. And we saw that with the NFC North, that eventually when you get, these teams beating up on each other, the wins aren't always going to be there. So, real interesting right there with how that looked, but I would actually be a little upset if I was an Eagle fan having Sirianni so low, considering what he, was able to do last year with that Eagles team. And then Andy Reid, I guess, I listen, they didn't have a good game in the Super Bowl, but he is what he is at this point.
So here's what I take from it. And the common denominator that I picked up on is the fact that all 8 of those guys ranked ahead of Dan Campbell have either won or been to the Super Bowl. So Dan Campbell is the highest rated head coach, according to Pro Football Focus, that has never stepped foot onto the field in a Super Bowl. Now, I think that PFF is cheating a little bit because I think the intent behind this ranking should be ranking the coaches in their current jobs. And I think that, at least in the case of Jim Harbaugh and to a different extent Sean Payton, I think they may be giving these guys credit for things that they did in their prior stops. So Sean Payton used to be the head coach of the Saints for all those years, won the Super Bowl. Jim Harbaugh took the 49ers to the Super Bowl and was so close to pulling one over on his brother in the Super Bowl about 12 or 13 years ago. So I think they may have some positive equity in those rankings based on what they did in prior stops. I guess if you think about it, Denver was in pretty rough shape when they brought in Peyton and they had Russell Wilson and they had signed to that insane contract, and they were able to weasel their way out of that and drafted Bo Nix, and it's worked out real well. But I don't know if I would necessarily call him the number 2 coach in all of football. Mike Tomlin, number 5. again, he's been the epitome of consistency. He's had a winning record every season. He's been a head coach all 18 seasons, and he did win a Super Bowl, but that was already a decade and a half ago. So, again, what are we really comparing is my issue. So, of course, these things aren't ever truly gospel necessarily, and this is really just one firm's opinion as far as it's something fun to talk about. Let's call it what it is. It's just something fun to talk about to break up the monotony and everything like that. But I think going back to Dan Campbell, Phil, I think we definitely have a golden opportunity right here in front to really build up some goodwill amongst the national media at this point, because he's in a very unique position to where he is going to have to replace both coordinators. He already has replaced both coordinators, but we're going to actually see what they do on the field and if that translates to anything. So we'll be able to really get a sense of, hey, is this really being done by Dan Campbell, or did we just get really lucky with some really good assistants that are head coach material these last few years?
Yeah, and both Sirianni and Shanahan, ahead of Dan Campbell, they have absolutely been in the same spot where I think it was Philadelphia 1 year lost both offensive and defensive coordinator, just like Dan Campbell. So again, those are teams that you're probably going to be, competing with or playoff spots. Certainly Philadelphia. We'll see where San Francisco kind of lines up, with some of the losses that they have had on their roster, just through some natural attrition there. But also Kyle Shanahan being, you know, ahead of Dan Campbell like that. I didn't think the Niners had a good season at all last year.
No.
And we arguably had more injuries than they did. So if they were going to be using injuries as an excuse for not winning more, well, proof's in the pudding there. So we'll see how that shakes out. But yeah, I think you're right. I think this is something that they really base a lot on Super Bowl, and I think on like legacy over time more than kind of like in the moment, basically.
In case anybody was curious as to who was number 10 on the list, so just behind Dan Campbell, well, that would be Kevin Stefanski, the head coach of the Cleveland Browns, who actually took them to the playoffs and got them to win a playoff game just a handful of years back. And he's had to navigate through some crazy personnel stuff and the Deshaun Watson hubbub and everything like that the last few years. And he's still gainfully employed from a franchise that, usually goes through head coaches like kids go through clothes in a day. So there's that.
Out of curiosity, where did they put Kevin O'Connell?
So he did not. So this was only a top 10 ranking. So he
top
did
10?
not crack
Okay.
the top 10. So going back to what you said, Phil, you mentioned the division at the very start of this. Yeah. Nobody from the division is part of that top 10. So Campbell's definitely getting if you look at it just from a broad-based point of view, from a national perspective, he's definitely getting the respect. That's why I kind of looked and kind of chuckled a little bit at this local media outrage. Oh, what do you mean? He's number 9. He's at the probably just about the top quarter of coaches in the NFL. That's about what you would expect. And for a guy that has not won a Super Bowl or been to a Super Bowl, I think that's definitely more than fair. No doubt about it. Okay, Phil. So before we head on off for just a few little days break, because we'll be right back at it on our normal schedule for our next episode. But since you and I have talked last, they have released the training camp schedule. So we are exactly 1 month away from opening day of training camp. So July 26th, the Saturday, 8:30 in the morning, will be the first training camp. Then Monday and Tuesday, July 28th and 29th. Sunday, August 3rd, Monday, August 4th, Wednesday, August 6th, Monday, August 11th, Wednesday, August 13th, Thursday, August 14th, and Thursday, August 21st are going to be the key dates as far as training camp goes, to where fans can go down and check it out. Some of them are going to be season ticket holders or Lions loyal members only. and I think the other half will be everybody as far as the whole fan base goes. So, Phil, what have you gotten as far as information from Lions Loyal? Has there been any intel as to what some of these Lions Loyal or season ticket holder members only types training camp outings? Any idea what those are going to look like this year?
Not as far as just what's going to make them different, other than it's basically just more inclusive to Lions season ticket members. Definitely planning on getting to one of them. Already got some folks that have basically called their shot. That they are going to come with me to that one. So we'll see. Could be a good opportunity to get an autograph or a photo or something like that. Certainly if there's going to be less people for those than they would for the general admission ones. But as far as I know, other than just the dates at this point, your guess is as good as mine. So I think this is going to be one of those ones that once they have those dates rolled out, they'll figure out, hey, how much time do we have with these players to do this amount of thing? So be on the lookout, because as soon as I do get some of that stuff from, the Lions, I will let know. But yeah, it seems like most emails I've gotten from the Lions or Ford Field recently have just been, concert announcements
Yeah,
at this point.
yeah. So we will do a touch base as far as what we're looking at from a Ford Field and game day perspective as it gets closer to the season, like we have done in years past, like any amenity changes that are going to be rolled out at Ford Field, or what's the concessions menu additions and things like that, and just anything else that would be helpful to help us peons get into the shoes of a Lions loyal or season ticket holder member, because hey,
I am a peon, Vince. I don't know what you're talking about.
and just to make things absolutely official, Phil, we absolutely now know that on Wednesday, August 13th and Thursday, August 14th, there will be 2 joint practices with the Miami Dolphins. So we'll have a chance to go toe-to-toe with them on consecutive days leading up to the Saturday, August 16th preseason game against the Dolphins at Ford Field. And then the following Thursday, August 21st, there will be 1 joint practice against the Houston Texans. So this is definitely becoming the way that things are working, especially as now there's chatter of a 18-game regular season sometime in the not so distant future. It almost makes you wonder, is this going to be the evaluation method of a lot of these rosters, figuring out how they're going to start cutting rosters down to what the number is? Because I don't think the number may necessarily stay at 53 if they're going to a bigger amount of regular season games. I'm not sure how that would work, but in any case, Phil, it's looking like joint practices aren't going anywhere anytime soon.
No, they're not. And, it's a little unfortunate because, I think we're accustomed based on what we saw last year. Just a lot of starters are not going to play in the preseason at all. If they are, maybe they're going to get a quarter in, a game or something like that. These tickets are the same price, as they would be for a normal regular season game. The issue here in Detroit is, of course, the regular season tickets have such high demand that often you cannot afford these tickets. So then you try to go to the preseason, but then all of a sudden you're not getting Jared Goff, St. Brown, Gibbs, Hutch, obviously. So you're not getting those guys in this game, but it's basically still just games on tape for these guys that are trying to make the roster. That's essentially all these is just going to be an extension of training camp, basically, at this point, rather than hoping to see, one of your favorite players out there.
And that's what's disappointing, is because you brought up a good point as to how, from a Lions standpoint, from a business perspective, they are operating these home games in the preseason as an extension of the regular season. So they are not giving these fans any type of a break at the box office. The concession prices are not less expensive. The parking passes are not any more affordable. So you're basically going there to watch the battle for the practice squad, if you will, and maybe if you're lucky depending on which game it is, depending on who you happen to be playing at that time. If the opposing coach has a different philosophy of the preseason and talent evaluation than the Lions do, maybe you'll get a chance to see some guy on the other team that you're halfway familiar with. But in most cases, Phil, that's not why you're going to these games. You're going to a Lions game to see your own guys, the guys in the Honolulu Blue. It doesn't really matter who the other guy. It's not like the NBA where it's so unbelievably superstar driven that you go to a Pistons game when LeBron James is there, or when back in the day Kobe or Shaq or any of those guys, or today if you're into it, Giannis or something like that, you go when you know they're going to be there. It's different with the NFL. It's because you have that hardcore, almost like tribalism, and you want to go see your guys, and they're still bending you over sideways, just like it were a regular season game, and you're not getting the same product on the back end.
That's, ultimately what a lot of the issue is, is just affordability.
Yep, absolutely. So that is all we've got for you on this abbreviated midweek episode of Kneecaps for Breakfast. We promise that things are going to calm down in our everyday lives, that we will be back for a traditional episode of Kneecaps for Breakfast coming up on Monday. We appreciate you bearing with us and being flexible. Phil and I look forward to taking you through the rest of the off-season here on Kneecaps for Breakfast. For Phil Byrne across the way, Vince Strogar saying good morning, go Lions, forward down the field, over and out.